2021, I believe. And I started talking to Stony. I found out about the program, and it was very new and very brief history. You know, William Clark built this house as a wedding gift for his son Charles and his wife Catherine. You know, this house has gone through lots of hands. You know, it has been a supporter of the arts in the past. So from 1917 to 1923, it was actually the Butte College of Music. And the music instructors used to have housing in where my office is on the 3rd floor. And so we also house the offices for the Butte Symphony, which is Montana's oldest symphony. And so I really love the idea that we're inviting artists into the space, and it's not just a private home, it's really a community space now that it's a county property. And I'm really thankful all for coming here and supporting the arts. And much like Stony was saying, without that support of Butte Riverboat and the taxpayers, and then our nonprofit, the Root and Bloom, and all of our community donations, we really wouldn't be able to do programming like this here in this building and really activate this space. So we really appreciate all of you guys taking your time to be here today. So if you guys are ready, okay. Thank you guys so much, and here are Elaine and Eric.
Hi everyone, I'm Liam Chapman. This is Eric Jensen. I am a ceramic artist and printmaker, and he is a painter. And we are the very first open-air residents for the Clark Fork Coalition. And we are so excited to share this experience with you all today. So thank you for being here. So we tried to do several options for this and do like a activity. And we didn't want to do an artist talk, but it kind of turned into that. So enjoy anyway, or get the boring stuff out of the way. We both love nature. Eric put this photo in without me knowing. We've been friends for a long time. The first conversation we had was about how to make work about nature, and it makes sense. So I will hand it to Eric to do a little intro on himself.
Okay, I'm Eric Jensen, and I'm an abstract landscape painter. This is one of my more recent pieces that I completed at the end of graduate school. This piece represents an experience of place over time. And specifically with this piece, it's me walking over 3 winters. The place is the confluence of the Clark Fork and the Bitterroot Rivers. This is a place of highly dynamic change with many islands and channels which have allowed it to remain rather free of development. And it's kind of just in the middle of Missoula. You can access it really easily. So I would often walk there with my dog after painting. As I would walk around, my thoughts would often mix with the sensation of place, which created this type of swirling awareness. These paintings represent that sensation, through a mixture of abstract and representational forms. The many different panels, which each represent a different outing, a different time, hopefully simulate the blurring and mixing of that experience. Finishing grad school for me was very shocking and confusing. Almost everything I had come to know and love was changed or gone. And it was really interesting because I went back to this spot on the Clark Fork afterwards, and it too had almost completely changed. There had been this massive flood that had rearranged all the channels, and there were these places that I had really come to know that were now completely gone. I was born in Utah and raised in a large Mormon family. But we moved to Virginia when I was young, and I ended up leaving the church when I was 17. Instead of going on a mission, I wanted to go to art school and live a different kind of life. There at undergrad, I trained as an abstract painter and a semi-conceptual sculptor. But like in grad school, when I left undergrad, I was rather heartbroken and confused. I was trying to figure out a worldview that I could motivate myself with that unified my love of nature that I found in my childhood with what I had learned in art school. This piece is both a portrait of a tree and a ritual celebration of the Pacific Northwest. Similar to Northwest artist Emily Carr, I found great spiritual importance in the Northwest woods, and my work started to focus around expressing that sense of place. When I went to grad school back in Missoula, I started to focus, what I wanted to really focus on was this thin area between abstract painting and representational painting. Like what can be achieved in that middle area? And this was especially interesting to me because I found when I painted that way, I stumbled across a lot of the repeating patterns that you find in nature. Sometimes these are called self-similar forms or fractal patterns. You can find examples of these in plant growth, on coastlines, in glacial erosion, tectonic activity, river channel erosion, cloud patterns. The list goes on and on. Breaking down similar forms evokes a sense of place that is more attached to memory and environment than something specific. My investigation into these basic forms of nature led me to become very attracted to natural areas of really high complexity. There are a few environments that really stand out to me, but old-growth forests are where I've always been heavily drawn to. Here, there are many layers of life interconnected in breathtaking displays of biodiversity and mutualism. These ecosystems are incredibly diverse and sustainable, making them excellent examples for our own communities. And even recent scientific studies have shown that being exposed to high degrees of fractal complexity, which is found in nature, is both psychologically and physiologically beneficial because it triggers relaxation and deep inner reflection. I would argue that seeing these patterns is also spiritually beneficial. At the Clark Fork Coalition field site, Lane and I have an incredible opportunity to really connect with place. My studies have created an enormous emphasis on how I create a relationship with the landscapes that I find myself in. I'm often questioning how I can explore a new place as yet another white man with all this brutal history of colonization and extraction. In rejecting the dogmas and patriarchies of my past, I have been trying to form a worldview that is both animate and interconnected. This belief system, I've been building it around Celtic spiritual philosophies, but it is also heavily informed by Taoist and Native American beliefs. Something I'm working on is to paint the land as a form of reciprocity or offering. I've been calling this a place spell. I'm trying to do this through acts like painting and drawing. However, it also feels right to do this by walking, meditating, and conducting personal rituals in or about these places. My intention is to build a respectful, intimate, and spiritual relationship with this landscape, and my hope that it will reveal more of its complexities to me over time. This piece here is a watercolor that I did before Lane and I went on our backpacking trip on the CDT. Our route took us along these ridge lines, and I did this painting before we went there to try to set an intention for the trip. Not really like making much of a plan, just really trying to be intentional about it. So these marks down here are in reference to the wildflowers, but also to different ideas and mantras that were in my mind as I was thinking about it. This painting here is of Mount Hagen and the valley that we've been staying in. You can just see the smokestack. This is the highway running through the valley and the different tailings ponds. Mount Hagen is also something that I was interested in potentially hiking while I'm here, but as we learn more and more about the situation, we've learned that it's heavily contaminated, that the bird species up there aren't doing well, so I don't know, maybe I won't go there. Okay, and I will turn it over to Lane.
Okay, so I'm going to go through me, and then we're going to talk about the Clark Fork Coalition. So like I said, I'm a potter. I grew up in a small town in central Arkansas. I have a lot to say about that, but all I'll say is it really shaped who I am and how I view the world today. I've always wanted to be an artist ever since I was a kid, but my family didn't want that at all. They're more into it now, but here I am. I did it anyway. I was painting and drawing and doing all kinds of things before an undergrad, and then my second year at undergrad I found ceramics, and then I found out you can paint and draw on clay, which was, I got bored with the 2D, and I like process-based mediums, so this was perfect for me. So I have a few photos of pots that I made years ago that I still like today. I found that I like making pots because of their utility and how the use of a pot creates a very intimate relationship with their user. And at this point, and still today, as you will see in the back, I'm still drawing dead bugs, birds, bones. I have a fascination with these life cycles and how humans today view those cycles, or not even think about them at all. So I thought that making pottery with these images or these concepts could be very powerful, portrayed on a physical object that one might use every day. I love to show the disgusting as beautiful, to pay homage to these organisms that some people find gross, because they are so important to our environment. So, if you will, I created a sacred space for them, figuratively in these larger pots, and literally. I did a solo show at the Clay Studio of Missoula where I made basically like shrines to my insect collection. And I just made pots and frames that went with them. So last fall I started grad school at in Missoula. I've been out of undergrad for 7 years trying to make a living as a potter. So I came in not wanting to make pots because, frankly, I was just bored with what I was doing. So I came in not wanting to make pots, didn't know what to do. I tried things, I failed some more. I had a hard time, I had a hard year. I think I had an identity crisis because if I don't make pots, am I still a potter? Like, what do I do now? And what do I call myself? People ask me what I do, and I say, oh, I'm a potter, but I wasn't making pots. So I started printmaking. I love it. I used the studio at school. The professor was great. I learned the processes, and I got really obsessed with it. And I made this print of this tree, which I have with me if you want to see it later. But it meant nothing. It was just like a pretty thing to look at. And I guess I needed that to come full circle back to making pots. So I'm back to making pots, but I'm making vessels that are more of statement pieces or decor, something that you would see maybe in a rich person's home is kind of like what I'm talking about. So here's some pieces that I made early summer before coming to this residency. One is a table piece, and the one on this side, the left, is pretty tall. It's like maybe to my hips. And so now I'm at the point where I'm questioning what I'm making, why I'm making it, what does it mean, and where does it belong in the world? And one of my goals for this residency was to attain a better grasp on that, on the answers to those questions. I don't know if I will ever know the answers to those questions, but grad school makes you know them. So the first thing I did when I got here was I finished a sketchbook I had made for myself, and I just want to fill it with experiences that I've had during this residency just as a fun side project. And it's in the back. You're welcome to look through it. It only has a few pages finished. But it's been a nice break from serious things. So I had a hard time in grad school because I have a bad habit of overthinking and thinking my ideas to death, where I'm just like, these are stupid. No one cares about this. So when I arrived at the residency, I made an intention to make whatever came to my mind, whatever came out of my head, what I was seeing, feeling, thinking about at that moment. And so I did. And here's me working on a print with our gorgeous view from our studio. So I have these blocks back on the table. You're welcome to look at them. They're unfinished at the moment. The Clark Fork Coalition Field Station is surrounded by a cattle ranch, and I started thinking about the environmental impacts of a ranch, and then I thought about, old paintings of ideal pastoral, romanticized landscapes that aren't depicting reality. And then I was thinking about humans' need for control of nature. So I started making work about ranching, which was not at all expected. And not all ranches, but some ranches kill quote-unquote pests that harm their livestock fields, like coyotes, wolves, prairie dogs, etc. And so I was making work about this. And I wanted to incorporate those thoughts with experiences that I had, like seeing vultures on the side of the road, or we saw this lamb that was trapped outside of the fence trying to get back into its family. And then something sort of serendipitous happened after drawing those blocks. I went to this fur store in Anaconda. I don't know if all of you have been there. It's insane. And I saw a lot of coyotes, a lot of them. And I saw the traps, like the exact traps that I had been drawing. And I had drawn this before I went to the store. And it was crazy that I saw these, and then we saw ranchers shooting prairie dogs on the 4th of July because they destroy the fields. And I understand it's their livelihood, but I have my opinions about it. And then I started thinking about what kind of work I want to make. Do I want to make controversial art? This is a pretty pointed statement. And I'm not at all against ranching. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to say. And do I want to make this pointed of a statement? Is my work considered political? Do I even want that? If you know me, I'm a very opinionated person. I can be very outspoken about that as well, and pretty blunt sometimes. And so for me, it comes natural to make pointed work, but I realize in today's time that I can't force everyone to believe what I believe. And that's wrong to do as well. So I'm trying to make work. I guess I'm asking myself, how do you make work that could maybe make a difference, maybe cause someone to think something different, but not tell them how to think, not tell them how to feel, or be offensive, but still get your point across? And I think that is a question I will forever be asking myself. So that brings me to the Clark Fork Coalition. Working with them has helped me get a better grasp on those questions because, they are an environmental protection organization. Not everyone believes in climate change or what is happening with this. And they do a lot of educational and community outreach events so that people know what's going on and the importance of our watersheds. And they do that because would you read a scientific report about contamination or environmental impacts of ranching? I wouldn't. So as an artist, it's a great way to get across the information, that information in a visual way that's more palpable for people and to a different audience. So maybe they see it in a different light and it's less boring than reading a scientific report about data. So I will turn it over to Eric. We're going to talk a little more about the Clark Fork Coalition and what they do and how we've incorporated that into our thought process.
Okay. So with the Clark Fork Coalition, we don't know exactly how much everyone in here knows about that organization or about the environmental disaster that the Superfund has been dedicated to. But Lane and I have both been learning a ton compared to what we knew before. We knew something was wrong, but we didn't realize the extent of it or know the specifics. So ever since 1985, the Clark Fork Coalition has been running a number of projects based on Superfund funding in the Clark Fork region to clean up the pollution and toxicity that has come down from the mining operations. Here is a video that the Clark Fork Coalition made.
The Upper Clark Fork is ground zero for the industrial development in this watershed.
Butte, Montana, copper capital of the world, built on what has long been known as the richest hill on earth. Below the surface, the men of the Anaconda Copper Mining Company enter their country's surface.
The Upper Clark Fork has a dubious distinction of being home to the largest Superfund site complex in the country. Extends from Butte 120 miles downstream to Missoula, where Milltown Dam, where that project happened a few years ago.
In 2011, after the Milltown Dam was removed, the contaminated sediments were cleaned up, restoration had happened at the confluence, we started to look upstream. And so suddenly we realized, okay, we've got the bookends of the country's largest hazardous waste site now cleaned up, but we've got a 120-mile river system in between that's still suffering.
Yeah, I buy alfalfa, I run cows, I understand you gotta have your water. But if you could just get that little bit of cooperation, just leave a little bit of water in the creek, or just change the diversion so a guy gets through there with a boat or the fish could survive, would keep water in the creeks and water in the river.
In order to get a healthy river back, you need to have not only the cleanup to return water quality, but you also need to reconnect the pieces of the river. We're looking at the whole of the landscape and how the river and its tributaries fit in and what the issues are, what the particular problems are in each part of the basin. We've developed a strategy with many partners from the state, federal level, and private partners to address these problems, and it's a multi-decade vision that we're trying to fulfill in bringing that river back to that potential.
The goal for restoring the Upper Clark Fork is to make it clean, healthy, and whole again. All the tributary work that we're doing, all the water transactions that gets more water back into streams, all of the riparian plantings that provide shade and habitat for aquatic species, all the diversions we're removing so that fish can move. You know, those are small projects, but when they accumulate, you know, after a few years, you've got 10, 20, 50, 100 on the ground, and suddenly you're getting towards your goal. Suddenly the river is cleaner, it's cooler, fish are moving, ranchers are making more money. That's the vision, and we know we're getting there. Year by year, we're tracking the results, we're learning lessons, we're adapting our technologies, and we're getting there.
Sorry about the potential sound quality of that. But we were hoping to get somebody from the Clark Fork Coalition to actually come and speak to you all, but instead they sent us that video along with a wealth of information that we'll be presenting on. We're not the scientists ourselves, but it certainly has been fascinating to learn about all of this. So I think we all know about the 1908 flood that happened, 33 days of straight rain apparently, that washed a lot of the toxins and tailings from Butte and the Anaconda area all the way down to the Milltown Dam near Missoula. The Milltown Dam caught many of these flood sediments, but what we weren't aware of before we came to the field site is that many of the sediments were also deposited along the river's length on the way down. This map shows the CFC's data prior to cleanup efforts. You can see the amount of red and yellow. Those are the areas where the concentration of those toxic metals is really high, and you can even see how scabby the land is. There isn't anything growing in those spots. This is our field site right here. So we have a trail that comes down to the river, and we can see all of this. So right before we came out here, I became aware of this thing called a slicken. I've never heard of this before. A slicken is a high-hazard floodplain contaminated with high levels of metals, including copper and arsenic. This person is standing on a berm that is close to collapse right next to the river there. And this pond is likely contaminated with the copper and other heavy metals, and it causes this rather gorgeous turquoise color. Here you can see a berm that is partially holding. That slicken is leaching into the Clark Fork. And you can see here how easy how much flooding potential there is and how easy the Clark Fork could run into these slickens. Between 2017 and 2020, there were a number of big storms that caused a lot of rainwater to come in, and it washed a lot of these toxic minerals into the Clark Fork, which has been causing these mass fish kills. The fish will die within minutes when these areas overflow. So this is what the Clark Fork Coalition is trying to clean up. This chart details what they have done so far. So here we are, Lane and I, out at our field site in phase 5 and phase 6. So they've cleaned up all of that area in that chart that we showed you initially. The areas above haven't been cleaned yet, but they're in progress, as well as just below river. And then all of these phases leading toward Deer Lodge are just pending. They're going to happen, but it's just a matter of time. You may be wondering, too, why the coalition didn't start at the top and move down, making sure that there wasn't any contamination that went back into the clean areas. But they've had a lot of issues with access, getting ranchers on board, other landowners.
Yeah, and another reason that for cleaning up not in order of, downstream is one, like you said, land access. So people who own land on the river don't want a construction site. Also, where people are. So the Clark Fork Coalition owned that ranch that the field site's on, but they sold it. But they used to own it so they could kind of see what a working ranch is like. And then also, like, if you start at phase 1, clean that, because they moonscape the whole river. If you start there and revegetate, it's going to take a while for the habitat to come back. And then if you go to phase 2 before the habitat's back, it's just going to be more damaging, and the habitat will be harder to come back if you do in order. So that's the reasoning why they've done that.
This aerial view shows what it looked like when they did phases 5 and 6. You can see it looks like a construction site, total removal of all soils and vegetation to get all of the toxins out of the way. Since this project, they have adapted that a little bit. They're trying to leave some of the more established trees, but there's a give and take to that because those trees, those willows, are contaminated. Here are a couple slicken assessments from those areas upstream from where Lane and I are. There are a few highly contaminated spots. And these are satellite images of those same spots. And you can see that turquoise color from space. It is that contaminated. We think that it's rather interesting, this idea that Montana is pristine, that it's this last best place. We think of this turquoise color as being associated with these lovely glacial lakes out in Glacier and other mountain ranges. And these are caused by different compounds. This is glacial milk instead of copper and arsenic. But we think it's an interesting comparison. So you may be asking yourself, what did they do with all of this contaminated sediment? Especially from the Milltown Dam. I mean, that was a huge amount of material that was down there.
So we were researching this, and we were told by the Clark Fork Coalition about this area. So these are the Warm Springs Ponds. There's a wildlife refuge there. and they're like containment ponds, and they filter basically the sediments sink, and then they filter water to clean the water. So there's like water treatments as well. And then to the left of that, all that area that looks like croplands, that is where all the Milltown Dam sediments went. And it used to be a pond. They mixed the slurry with water, and it's all since dried out. And now there's a issue of dust, so that the dust is toxic. And they use this site because in that valley, it's the least amount of annual precipitation, so it has less risk of leaching into the ground. And they tried to plant plants on top, and I think they've done some grass to help with that as well. But the scale of this is just insane.
And the other thing that we should mention on top of all this is that climate change is changing weather patterns. We're getting these erratic storms, and there's potential that the known weather patterns in places will change. So if that valley starts getting more rainfall, then all of those toxins are going to wash back into the drainage, and we're going to be right back where we started.
So, after all of that depressing information, here's a fun photo of all the birds that I've seen, because I'm obsessed. And Eric and I did a collaboration piece. This is one of his paintings. And so basically we make art as a way of like processing information. And we are obsessed with this color of the slicken because it's so beautiful but so toxic. And so we've been using that color a lot in our work. So here's this, and then I did a piece that goes on top of that. And so basically the concept was his painting was like before cleanup, where things were bare and there was a lot of that color. And then mine was supposed to be like when the birds were back, the fish are back, there's vegetation, but you can still see that color coming through because it's still contaminated, even today, just not as much in that area. And then, again, we thank you for being here. Here are some resources if you're interested in reading more about the information we've learned, and then how to look at our work and reach us if you would like. And now it's time for questions or conversation. Or you're welcome to get up and look at the work.
I have a question. Sorry. With your collaboration, are you painting and drawing on Mylar?
Yeah.
And so is this kind of going to be hopefully what you're producing a body of work that's going to be a series of these, or just a one piece, or you don't have to know either?
We're not sure.
Yeah, we did this specifically for today, just so we would have a piece that, because like I'm making work about ranching and he's doing, landscape. So we wanted to make something that's directly related to the Clark Fork. You had a question?
Yeah, you're going back to grad school for September, right?
Yes.
Finishing up.
Mm-hmm.
How does this inform what your expectations are?
It's been really freeing because grad school is very you have to defend everything. And I had a hard time with that, and it's been freeing to be able to feel like I have, and I know that I can make whatever I want in grad school, but it's a lot more pressure. And I think this will really help me going back into school because next semester is a big semester for me, so yeah.
I'm kind of curious about, because you guys are pretty immersed in what you've mentioned are like depressing topics. And I'm just curious how that balance is between being makers, but also taking this time to really think about, some of the stuff going on in the environment that's literally right outside your door. So can you talk about that balance?
Yeah, I can start, and then if you want to. Eric and I maybe are bad for each other in that way because we both get really depressed about it. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I just do my best to be informed and try to be a part of change because I want to make a change, but also I want to live my life and not be miserable every day. I won't lie, medication has helped a lot with that. And I think that's something I'll struggle with forever. Yeah. And being at the field site hasn't been, like learning about all of this is depressing that it's still happening, but it's very, it informs my work, and it hasn't been, we're learning how to clean it up, so that's been a positive of that.
Yeah, again, like Lane mentioned, that really speaks to what Lane and I have been discussing since we became friends. Like, how do you make art in this world? How do you make art when it seems like it's just not as effective as other methods? But obviously, we have both stayed committed to that. I think there are a lot of really big questions out there. You get really caught up with that kind of stuff in grad school, but I find that just getting back into the studio every day and making it happen is that answer. It doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but it does feel like I'm doing something.
Can I piggyback on it, just a reflection, thinking about that, the tension of like being with an organization that is, involved in research or, actively hands on the ground, restoring a watershed that has been impacted by, the impacts of mining and human use, ranching, and that, as you mentioned, Lane, at the beginning, I think it was you that had said something about one of you, but just that they have a communications team, because people are not going to sit there and read the data, right? Mm-hmm. And thinking about there's the infrastructure of the issue, but then there's the belief systems, the communication, the understanding of communities around those issues, and that if people aren't in alignment or excited about something or care about the rivers and care about the animals that are impacted by it, then what good is the science? So there's a real utility and kind of part of the idea of the partnership of putting artists together with these sites where they might have a bit of a PR issue. Coalition's doing good, in part because they value artists and they value that considering the bigger issues. So that's less question, but I just kind of think about that.
Yeah, to add to that, I was talking to someone about the Clark Fork. They did a bird banding, the Umble Lab from UM, and it was really awesome. We got to see birds up close and how they do the research. And the results do show that the birds around our area are still contaminated somewhat. But I heard someone say that one of the reasons they got the ranch was to understand how that works and how a polluted river would affect that. And also how to talk to the community around there, because it is a lot of ranching and a lot of people don't want to deal with that or care. And so learning how to find a common ground with those people, I think is really important, and they do a good job with that.
To add to that as well, Stony, there's a ranching family that now owns, that bought the ranch from the coalition. We just are staying in this little field center that the coalition still owns. And apparently there's some tensions between the two parties. The ranchers really want their privacy and want to be able to just do their thing there. But we're glad that that space does exist so we can see what's going on. And as I'm sitting there painting the landscape, I often wonder what they would think about it. What do these ranchers think about these landscape paintings I'm making? Is there any potential to make a common ground through that commonality? Here we all are in this place.
I'm sure they love the views as much as we do. So.
Yeah, we just won't talk. Who knows? I don't know.